Hey everybody, and welcome to my garden. Today I'm going to walk you through what I use to set up my drip line in my garden and talk to you about all of the pieces that you will need to set up a similar system. Every year, the more I add to my garden and the larger it grows, the more I put forward the goal to automate my watering system. And you cannot just rely on a sprinkler system. If you don't have a sprinkler system, God bless you. I grew up without a sprinkler system, and one of my jobs in the garden growing up was to move the sprinkler every 20 to 30 minutes every summer. I had no idea what joy came out of sprinklers and then what joy comes out of a drip system. So today I want to walk you through the products that I use to set up drip, the sources of water that I'm using, and then we'll go out into the garden. I'll show you some things that I'm doing with my drip for the plants I'm planting now. I'm going to start by talking about the tubing that I use within the system. The first two actually that I use are what's called half-inch tubing, and these come in a series of colors, but most notably black. And this black one is just solid tubing. It has no holes in it. It's really just meant to get the water from one place to another. You can tap into it, and I'll talk about that in a second, tap into that for drip line emitters, but it really is just a water movement tool. The second half-inch tube that I have here is one that has holes, and this one is every 18 inches. So this is a drip emitter tube, and it already provides you holes every 18 inches. And this is going to give you 1 gallon per hour out of each of the holes. And you can also get this in 12 inches apart. So the most common that you'll find at your local hardware store or online is every 18 inches. But if you do Google, type in every 12 inches, it's out there too. I just got some just off of Amazon this year. So both are 12 inches. There are a lot of different types of tubing you can get. Some are more flexible than others. This is just sort of your basic tubing. They do come in large spools such as this. So this is 100 feet of premium poly drip tubing, and this is half-inch. So they do come wound up. One tip when you take off the wiring and you take off the plastic is to find a buddy, have someone hold the end, and then slowly unwind the tubing. When it's been in this state for so long, it wants to stay curled, and it often will give you unnecessary kinks. Like I was noticing on this one tends to kind of want to kink at the end, but this is just a sample tubing that I pulled off some old section. So just a tip for you on that. The other tubing that I have here is 1/4 inch tubing, and this is the tubing that you typically run out to plants, or you run along railings to get to hanging window baskets or hanging baskets. You can use this as, and it comes in black. You can easily find it. I have it here in white. I was using this to run some drip out to some hanging baskets I have on the side of our wraparound porch, and I didn't want the black to stand out. You can paint this tubing easily, so if you don't have just a white or a black setup, I believe I've seen it in a sandy color too, so just take a look online and see what you can find. But if you can't find the exact color, you can take the color of your house, you can take the color of your railing and simply paint it, and it will blend in nicely. When you do connect tubing to any sort of surface, you can also find, again, online, these little 1/4 inch tubing mounts that go onto your house or to your railing. So I don't know how easy it is for you to see, but it just has a really small groove that you put the tubing in, and then you nail it into the surface just like that. So it stays nice and tight, and you can get it to where you don't ever see the tubing, which is fantastic. One other thing about 1/2 inch tubing, I keep saying that, is that you can get these in a soaker hose. So meaning that it's completely perforated, and it it does just what it says. It soaks the water outside of the hose. That's what you typically see in vegetable gardens. Ran around different vegetable gardens. They're definitely more flexible, and they provide constant moisture coming out of the tube at all lengths, and are a really handy use for vegetable gardens or areas where you just have thick plantings, or you can put them in a circle in a pot. Either way works just fine. After you've ran your water source tubing, so more of your 1/2-inch type tubing, you do want to stake them down. So I use just typical landscaping stakes. I got this grouping in a box of 200, I believe. I go through them very quickly, so I tend to buy more than I think I do, and then I go through them and then I have to buy more. But these are 8-inch. You can get them in also 6-inch stakes. I really prefer the 8-inch, especially because I'm building up new gardens and I have a lot of loose soil, so I really want to make sure that I can push it down and secure it to the ground, such as this. So on a tube that has the emitters every 18 inches or has the emitters at all, I tend to stake right on top of the emitter to push that down because it's a little bit more solid, but it really doesn't matter. It's just kind of what you need to use to hold that to the ground. So after you have placed them into the ground, let's talk about emitting water. So if you're running just a standard solid black tube for your garden beds, you want to think about where you're going to be sourcing the water. If you're running this next to, say, a hydrangea or a shrub that needs a lot of water, or I guess any water at all if you're not using the emitters, you want to tap in however much water is going to be needed. So let me show you what is an emitter from my handy dandy toolbox here. So in my toolbox for drip irrigation, I have my emitters broken out by the different gallons per hour that they provide out into the ground. And I'm just going to pull a couple of these out here and put this off to the side. So these are drip emitters, and this one is a 2 gallon per hour. And if you buy a pack and then you dump them into, say, a box like this, and then you forget, you always can see on the side of each of the emitters, this says 2.0 GPH, gallons per hour. So that means that if you are going to be running your drip for an hour, you're going to get 2 gallons of water to that plant. Most people don't run them for that long, so you can do the math to see how long it takes. Each of these emitters has a pointy end that comes out, and that is simply to be able to plug them in without using any tools. So I can come in here to my tubing and I can just sort of push it around and it will pop in. I promise. I have butterfingers today. All right, and it popped in just like that. Now, if you don't want to use all of that effort, you can punch holes along this tubing as well. And I do that with a puncher tool, and these are pretty, I think it's still, oh, it doesn't have the price on it, but these are pretty inexpensive. You can get online or at the hardware store, but you can see that as you squeeze it, it punches a hole. So all I would do is come in, grip the pipe, punch it, pull out, and then you can see that it left a little hole there. And then it's much easier to pop in your emitter. Boom, right there. Now, if your drip line is not right next to the plant and you need to run emitter tubing out into the plant, say you want to run your 1/4 inch tubing out to the plant, you can connect it here, just right onto the emitter that you connected to the line, which is one way to do it. And I've seen people do this a number of ways. So I just rocked that emitter, 1/4 inch emitter line onto the 2 gallon per hour emitter, and then say that that plant is yay far away. Now I'm going to be getting 2 gallon per hour water out to the plant through this line, and you're done. You can stake them in if you like, just to make sure that it's getting to the plant. Now, I've seen people use the smaller emitters to feed out to a plant and then put an emitter on the end. So let me show you that. So in order to add a drip tubing line, say the 1/4 inch drip tubing line to the 1/2 inch drip tubing line, we're going to use what are called couplers. And for this, these are the 1/4 inch couplers. They're very, very small. You have a straight edge, a straight coupler, a cross coupler, a T coupler, an elbow, and then these are plugs. Sometimes people call them goof plugs, but they're just plugs for if you make a hole by mistake and you want to plug in, or you just need to end a line. So each of these are really heavily used in my yard. I would say probably the most heavily of them all is the T coupler. I just had to buy some more of those because I'm often taking a line and then making a new extension off of a 1/4 inch tubing line. So for today and for this demonstration, I want to show you another way that you can create a emitter, jolt, line, whatever you want to call it, off of your 1/2 inch tubing that you've already placed in your landscape. So I'm going to take a 1/2 inch, a 1/4 inch coupler right here, and I'm going to get as much line as I need for this experiment demonstration. And you want to make sure you get that cut as flat as possible when you're putting in your drip line. Now what you want to do is just take your coupler and attach it into your 1/4 inch drip line. You can do it by hand. If you're doing a lot of this, the tool that I found that is so awesome, and I did not know about it until last year, and I wish I knew before, but it's another tool that looks a lot like the puncher tool. However, on this one, it's going to push the coupler into the drip line, and let me show you. So all I have to do is put my coupler right in there. I feed my drip line, kind of hold it, and I'm doing this with my left hand, but you squeeze and it comes together. So much easier, especially if you have any sort of arthritis in your hands or you have just a lot to go through. Investing in one of these puppies is really worth it. So I have put the coupler onto the 1/4 inch tubing, and then I also want to put my emitter onto the end. So I'm just going to grab another emitter. You can do the same thing by using this handy dandy tool. If it's going to let me today, we'll see. There we go. And now I want to attach it into my 1/2 inch line. Punch a hole. Plug in my coupler line, and I'm off to the races with a little bit longer of a tubing. So I want to point out this side where I used a coupler to the 1/4 inch tube to the 2 gallon per hour emitter will provide the same effect as putting the 2 gallon per hour emitter directly on the 1/2 inch tube, and then just simply putting that 1/4 inch line directed towards the plant. Either are okay, either work. It's just really your preference on how you tend to set up your system. And honestly, I kind of go back and forth. I tend to prefer the path of least resistance and putting the emitter directly into the 1/2 inch tubing and just putting a line out to the plant, but it's definitely up to you. We talked about the 1/4 inch couplers, and I want to talk about the 1/2 inch couplers a little bit too, because you will have times where you need to connect a 1/2 drip tube to another 1/2 drip tube, or you need to elbow them off, or you need to split and send another line in another direction. And just like the 1/4 inch couplers, we have 1/2 inch couplers. So these are obviously going to be larger and come in all different shapes and sizes. So you have your T, you have your elbow, and you have your straight coupler on that. There's also another version of these couplers that they usually come in brown. I've seen them in different colors, but mostly I see them in brown. These are also 1/2-inch couplers, even though they look quite a bit smaller. The difference is, instead of going on the outside of the tube here, they go on the inside of the tube, and they have this barbed section, so they're actually called a barbed coupler. Perfect name. I tend to prefer these barbed couplers to the black external couplers. They're so much easier to put together. I think they have a cleaner look to them when you are fixing a drip line. And let me just show you, when I place them in, I just have to do a couple wiggles and they're in, just like that. And then you would bring the other side to the other end and you're off to the races. Whereas the couplers that are the L-shaped, I feel like I'm just fighting a battle. So, path of least resistance. I tend to use the barb couplers just like the others. Like this one is an L shape. They have a T shape, and you can use them in any way, just like the other couplers. Finally, let's talk about the ending. So ultimately, eventually you'll come to an end and you'll need to cap the end of the drip tube. There are caps that look like this, but obviously they have an end on them that you can place on. I have found over time they eventually bust off with the pressure of the water. The enders that I like, that's probably not the official word, but I'm going to call them the enders, is a figure-8 ring. And how this works, it bends the tubing for security of the water. So all you have to do is slide on one side, bend the tube, use a little bit of muscle. Usually these tubes aren't sliding away from me when I do this. And then push that figure-8 up as much as you can on that bar. So you can do as long or as short of a section. I find that this lasts so much longer, and if you decide you want to extend out from this line ever again, you don't have to cut it off and waste this end piece. You can just slide it down, unbend the hose, unbend the tubing, use a coupler and extend on, and then you have this piece to use again. The last two things I want to talk to you about are some emitter accessories, and then also how to find the source of your water for your drip lines. So first, on the market today, there are a lot of fancy pants accessories that are out there for drip line work, and it can get very confusing. Really just focus on what do you think is going to work best for you, how much water you're going to need to different areas. I have tried a few of those ready-made drip kits, and they all work really well, but you are stuck in that brand, that style, and it's really hard to switch back to just the normal what you see on the shelves at your local Home Depot or Lowe's or whatever you might be looking at. So I would just encourage you to try one of those systems if you'd like. If you're starting small, feel free to try, but then see what else is out there. Branch out, try to build your own system, build your own box. But I want to show you that this emitter here, and I have another one to show you too, is actually an adjustable emitter. So you can change the gallons per hour by simply turning it to the left or to the right. I've started using more of these in my garden, and I really do enjoy them because instead of having to buy a whole bunch of 2-gallon, 4-gallon, 1-gallon per hour emitters, I just buy a bunch of these, and then if I feel like the plant is not getting enough water or needs less water, all I have to do is just a simple adjustment to the emitter head. So this one is a fancy pants accessory that I definitely have started using more often and suggest that you may want to try as well. That also comes in a stake version. So for the first time this year, I'm trying these in my vegetable garden. I have 1/4 inch soaker hose in my vegetable garden, but my vegetable garden runs off of a zone that's also tied into my lawn. And I'll talk about that in a sec, but I needed certain areas that are going to get more water because I don't run that zone for as long as I would typically run a zone on soaker hose. So I need to make sure that in certain areas for certain plants, I'm cranking up the water emission to those areas for that shorter period of time. So I have placed a few of these in different strategic areas within my vegetable garden. So far, so good. I'll definitely give you updates throughout the season, and we can take a look at some of them down there as well. But again, it has that control of crank up for more, crank down for less, and so you have a little bit more control. I will say that connecting the 1/4 inch drip tubing to this coupler is not easy, and it does not fit in my little tool. So I've only put out a few of these. I feel like I have to spread it out so my hands don't yell at me. But if you have strong people around who like to connect drip tubing, go for it. All right, so the next thing and the last thing I want to talk to you about is water. I have the setup done in all sorts of different ways. One of my drip zones is set up based on a sprinkler. So I had 2 sprinkler heads that I no longer needed because I removed grass. The previous owners had capped one of them off, and it was an area where I needed to run a lot of drip line, one specifically back in my shade garden because I automated that watering, and another one down in my vegetable garden. So online, you can go and Google or just search on Amazon, sprinkler to drip line adapter, I guess that is what I called it. And you will find all sorts of different options out there. Rainbird is the brand that I typically went with because that was what my whole sprinkler system was built off. And what you'll find is that they are really easy, ready-made, just replacements of your sprinkler head. And so you take out the old sprinkler head, put in the new sprinkler head. You have to dig down pretty deep. And one of the adapters that I have just comes up to a T, and it comes up to a T that is exactly like this. It's actually this exact mechanism where I have a 1/2 inch tubing coupler on each side, and the water comes out. Built into the adapter that you get from Rainbird is a pressure stabilizer, so you're not getting insane pressure like you would normally get out of a sprinkler head, and then you're off to the races. The other coupler that I have, or adapter that I have into the sprinkler line, is actually an adapter that goes to 1/4 inch tubing because it was for my vegetable garden. So it looks like an octopus and it was the same exact thing. I replaced the sprinkler head piping, and it came up, and then it goes out into, I think it's what, 6 or 8 different 1/4 inch emitter heads. And that was extremely easy to put in within my vegetable garden and is working really well. You will find people that say, don't put a drip line off of a sprinkler zone that's meant for the grass. I definitely agree because you want to run them at different times, but if that's all you have, and that's all I had in those areas, it works, and I'm making it work. I just have to make sure that I'm running enough emitters to the plants so that they're getting enough in the short period of time that I'm running that zone. So for those experts out there saying, don't run it off a lawn zone, I know, but it's all I had. The other area that I have drip running from is actually a zone dedicated only to drip line. So when we moved into this house, there was an exterior drip system. So I tapped into that for the majority of what's going to be going on in my flower beds this summer. And this is something I'm working actively on right now to set up. They say that you should only run no more than 100 feet of line off of one zone. And I think I'm pushing the envelope on that a little bit this year, but so far so good. I'll definitely keep an eye on it, and if I have to adjust, I will. But that zone is off of my sprinkler system, but it is only for drip, so it does run a little bit longer. What I do have here though is where I started. So I started with working my drip off of just a hose bib adapter. So I adapted this up to my sprinkler hose. There are a couple pieces you do want to add in if you are doing this for a drip line, and so please do Google it if you are adapting a drip line from a hose bib, because you want to put in a pressure gauge to slow down that pressure. I like these. There's a lot of fancy pants out there for drip line connectors to hose bibs, but I like just the traditional. You have two connectors, you have a dial, you can set it, start at this time, run for this long, on and off, and it's great. And then if you have your drip hooked up to one side, you can still run your hose off the other side. So super slick. Now that we've gone over all of the pieces that I use to set up my drip line, let's go out in the garden. I'll show you how I use them. So we're here in the shade garden, and I have a line of Annabelle hydrangeas, and I have my 1/2 inch every 12-inch emitter tubing running along this bed already. However, that's not going to be enough for these hydrangeas. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be popping in a couple 2-gallon-per-hour emitters around the base of each hydrangea, and then I'll see how close the line runs, and if I need to get the water a little bit further in, I might go ahead and cut off a couple pieces of 1/4-inch emitter tubing to make that work. So I noticed that when I came down here, I did have one of the holes from the 1/2-inch emitter tube right near the base, so that's going to give it 1 gallon per hour. I did go ahead and still pop in the 2-gallon-per-hour emitters here, but I did send a 1/4-inch emitter tube kind of towards the front of the root ball, and then I used this 1/4-inch stake to go around the drip line, and then directed it exactly where I wanted to. So that's what I did for this one. I'm going to go through the other 5 that I have, and then I'll show you some other places. Down here in our sunnier gardens, I wanted to point out our drip line and what we have going on in a couple different areas. If you watched our video about planting the salvias, you'll know that I have a 1/2-inch brown emitter every 12 inches line that runs just along the backside of the salvia, and I won't be tapping in any additional emitters to that line because these plants are drought tolerant. They're already going to get some overhead sprinkler water, and they really don't need more. If it gets really hot this summer, I'll keep an eye on them and add in a couple drip line or a couple emitters if I need to. I want to talk about this plant real quick, but first of all, let's lay eyes on my beautiful new spirea that I got. It's a double play red, Proven Winners. It's going to go in this spot to add some foundational structure to this garden bed, and I am so excited. Anyways, I digress. Down here, I want to point out that underneath this pot, you'll see that there is a 1/4-inch black tubing that is coming out of the bottom and also coming out of in the middle. I'm getting in the habit of every time I am clearing out a pot, I am running this emitter up through the bottom, even if I have nowhere to plug it into yet. I want to automate all of my pots as well and make it so that the drip line is not coming up over the back of the pot and visible. So I ran this emitter up here when I planted up this pot about a month ago, and I'm going to tap it into this 1/2-inch line just with a 1/4-inch coupler, and then cut the rest of this line off. And then at the top of the line up here, I'll probably add in a T or maybe a cross coupler, put on a couple extra lines so that I could get water emitted to a couple spots within this pot. So when I can remember, I don't always remember. I've actually repotted a couple pots because I forgot and really wanted it set up, but I am trying to make this a habit and getting all these set up and ready for drip. All right, so let's go over to the vegetable garden. I want to just show you one last thing here. So in our vegetable garden, over here, we have a network of the soaker hose that I talked about earlier in this video. And so most of this that's going around this whole vegetable bed is soaker hose and providing a fair amount of water to the area every time it's watered. How we're getting the water to this bed is via an old sprinkler head that's underneath this vegetable bed. So when we built the vegetable bed, we built it on top of a cap sprinkler line. But then after last year, I realized that I wanted to go down in and actually tap into that sprinkler line to have this be on the same zone as the lawn. And I know that kind of sounds weird, but it worked out because I wanted it to be on a separate drip line than the rest of my vegetable bed. So I used one of those adapters, and this one was an adapter to the sprinkler head that went to 6 1/4-inch emitter heads here. And so you can see I have a couple of them that are not in use, so I just capped them off. But eventually this is going to feed over to my garlic and to a couple other climbing vegetables that I have planned. But for the rest of it, they're being tapped into and they're feeding the rest of this bed. And so far it's just working awesome. Let's take a look at the other side of the vegetable bed and I'll show you how I set that up. All right, so over on this side of the bed, I know a lot of it we're kind of in a weird sun and shade situation, but this is an in-ground vegetable bed that I set up this year. This used to be my dahlia garden, but I moved it over. I have rows for my vegetables, and then I have set up the drip line, as you can see, to come down each row in the center. I will, as I plant up different items, probably set emitters to emit off more water to any of these sections. But for now, this is doing exactly what it needs to do in this colder time of the year and just getting some of these vegetables started. So I'm really excited about how this one turned out. This is on a separate zone. It's on the sprinkler drip line 4. That's a zone that's only for drip. So it can get a little bit more water during the day, but for now, it works out just fine. I do want to show you guys though, one cool thing. So if you have a sprinkler system in your house and it has the sprinkler controls that are inside in your garage and the laundry room and you're constantly having to go inside and out, I got the best Christmas present this last year. So I use a system called the Veggies system, and it is a sprinkler management tool. And all I have to do is open up an app on my phone and I can turn on the sprinklers. So if any of you are interested in automating your sprinkler system even more than it already is, I would definitely say check it out, because I have done so much work this spring of going back and forth of trying to get zones set up, see how the drip is working. And with this, I don't have to go inside. All I have to do is bring up the Veggies app, pick which zone I want to go and hit it, and it starts, and all is well. The other great thing about it is that it's looking at the weather, and so it's only going to run your sprinklers on days where it's not going to rain. You don't have to be looking at the forecast and turning it on and off, so it's great. Anyways, I hope you guys found this video really helpful. Happy that you spent some time in my garden with me today, and I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye. If you like what you see here today, be sure to click the like and subscribe button, and if you want to be notified of new episodes, click the bell.